Well, good morning, everyone. And I just want to take a moment to welcome all of our guests who've joined us today for this very exciting discussion on how understanding data and the signals and data that people emit have become critical for us to reach out to our customers. And I'm very glad to be able to introduce myself. I'm Stuart Pearce. I'm the CEO of TD Global. And I'm also a proud member of the Ict Committee here at the British Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who are not too aware of the Ict Committee, the Ict Committee's mission is to educate, engage the Chamber members, inspire non-members on the transformative capabilities of ICT and information technology, not just to their businesses, but potentially their customers as well. And we seek to add value to the Chamber and its members through discussions like this. And that helps our members to further their own business interests and the companies they work for. So I'd encourage all of you who've joined us today, if you're not a member of the Chamber, please have a look at the Ict Committee. And we run many events like this. And I'd also like to especially mention the Marketing and Communications Committee, who have been a tremendous support for this event. Having said all of that, this event is specifically designed to address the challenge presented by the deluge of data and signals that come from people such as you and I as we go about our daily lives, and how understanding that data is critical for every business. Of course, we all understand that data is the essential differentiator to help you become better at connecting your brand and your organization with audiences and building relevance and driving business growth. But in this session, we will share the following. We'll explore how data and creatives are connecting to maximize business potential, how the application of new approaches to audience data is helping to revolutionize how we connect people to our brands, how the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning is helping to make complex digital world much more simple and usable for more organizations, and not just for those with specialist knowledge and experience. We'll talk about the future of influencer marketing. And of course, we'll look to demonstrate new strategies for driving creative effectiveness in a cookieless world, which is a particularly interesting discussion. With that in mind, and with that introduction made, I'd like to start off with our panelists, who I'll introduce individually. And just to let the audience know, we have a series of 4 panelists who'll be joining us in a panel discussion a little later on. But before then, we have each of them have recorded a pre-recorded video to cover off each of their topics. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Thomas Brauch. Thomas is the Chief Data Officer for APAC at Wunderman Thompson. Thomas has over 20 years of experience in CRM and loyalty, e-commerce, consumer research, reporting, statistical modeling, and advanced analytics. His track record of helping brands understand customers' interests, needs, and motivations to create meaningful, relevant, and personalized experiences is unsurpassed. And we really look forward to hearing from him today. He's worked with companies like Allianz, BAT, GSK, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, United Healthcare, and many others. And we look forward to hearing from Thomas now. So Sabina, if you go ahead and turn over to Thomas, we'll hear his comments before moving on. Many thanks.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Brauch. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Wunderman Thompson in APAC. Today, we're going to embark upon an age-old pursuit to see further with greater understanding by using tools. In this session, we'll look at how AI and machine learning tools can unlock insights around how consumers react to and engage with creative and brand experiences. Now, traditionally, our way of doing performance measurement around creative and experiences has been to look at stimuli often in market, look at potentially engagement that has come from that, and down the road sometimes using often attribution modeling, identify conversion and business outcomes tied back to that experience or that creative. But in doing so, we may have actually been missing the forest for the trees, in the sense that we've been focused on engagement rather than reaction. We've been focused on the who in audience targeting and selection and the how in experimental designs and optimization rather than the why. In doing so, we've effectively been able to measure views and clicks and shares, but maybe missed, more importantly, the emotive response. What we've missed by looking simply at views, clicks, and shares is the emotional response. Do consumers, by example, lean in? Do they smile? Are they excited by our creative? Does it envelop an emotive response to change or to elicit behavior, to inspire engagement? We want to be able to measure and understand this emotional response. The type and level of that response is going to be key to ensuring that our creative lands and resonates with consumers. So to do this, we're going to look at the two frameworks, neuromarketing and vision AI. Now, neuromarketing has been around for decades, and psychologists have looked to understand what drives behavior. But often this has meant hooking people up to clumsy machines, EKG and wiring, and trying to look at consumers in isolated and controlled environments. What Vision AI does with facial recognition and emotive encoding unlocks consumer insights in a more natural and authentic way. And what it allows us to do is to tap into the emotive element of a consumer, what we would call System 1 intelligence. While we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, the reality is that most of our decisioning is in fact unconscious. It's fast, associative. You may know is shooting from the hip or gut reaction. It's these types of gut reactions which often dictates whether or not we'll respond to an ad. In the few microseconds that we may have to capture a consumer's attention and cut through, it's this emotive System 1 thinking that we need to tap into and then make sure that we're eliciting responses from. So let's take a look at how we might do this by looking at a toolkit that's been developed on GCP using both Google and Microsoft Vision AI toolkits. What you can see here are three different creative pieces, and in each one, we're able to observe as consumers are observing the creative in a very organic and natural way, either on their desktop, tablet, or in a mobile device in their own setting. Which of the ads are eliciting engagement and the type of engagement? So by example, for a confectionery, the engagement we may be looking for is happiness. Are our ads elevating levels of excitement and happiness? Whereas for a car manufacturer, where the key emotion that we're trying to elicit may be excitement, enthusiasm, or joy, are we both eliciting high levels of engagement, and also is that emotion that we're seeing around high levels of excitement? Or if we consider, by example, a branch of military, for example, the Republic of Singapore Air Force. Here we want to take a look at, again, elevated levels of emotion, and are we getting the right emotion, which again is going to be excitement. And maybe are we driving that for our key consumer audience, which may be younger males. So by being able to tap into Vision AI, we can look at the level of engagement, we can look at the prevailing emotions, we can connect this to target audiences, and we can do creative comparisons. But we want to be able to drill down even more. So the tool also allows us to look frame by frame, look second by second, in fact, millisecond by millisecond to how consumers are reacting, to ensure that that initial excitement that we may be able to ignite is sustained and carried through, to ensure if there's a variety of emotions that may carry through the narrative arc of that piece of creative, that we're mirroring those emotions in terms of consumer feedback. Also, we want to take a look at key highlights in the creative piece. Ideally, what we're seeing is where there's a brand reveal, there's elevated levels of excitement and engagement. And in fact, in the ad unit here, we can see that the highest level of happiness, the highest level of engagement comes around the brand reveal. We can also look at AI in other ways, where the creative may be delivered out of home. In this way, again, being organic in the background and being unobtrusive in the way that we capture consumer behaviors is important and key. What we're able to do here is essentially look at consumers as they're walking by an out-of-home display. We can rotate different ads, looking at environmental attributes or time of day or day of the week, looking at the composition of the audience and seeing which ads are capturing the greatest level of attention. When we capture that attention, what emotions are associated with that. This solves many problems that we have in out-of-home display, like attribution. And again, pairing the right display or the right ad to, again, environmental attributes, like time of day, day of week. A smarter application of this will actually allow us to feedback or customize the ad based on the consumer that may be walking by. This is an area that continues to grow and be an opportunity for Vision AI. Another area is in the area of research, one-on-one qualitative research, where there may be an element of product design, packaging. This is useful in areas like beauty, where maybe scent or feel is important to a product. Being able to not only understand consumers and how they verbally are telling us, do they like the smell or do they like the feel of the product, but looking at those facial emotive expressions are also very important to help us understand which elements in terms of packaging or scent design will be important in terms of consumer satisfaction and usage of that product as well. Another area to consider in terms of Vision AI isn't necessarily looking at creative and the output of that creative and how it, again, connects with consumers and does it elevate their levels of engagement or excitement and does it have an emotional response, but also taking a look at insights that may help us with creative design. Here, Vision AI allows us to have better insights from consumers drawn out of social. This is relevant because there's a growing body of information available to us through social posts and looking at the visual elements of that. Here's an example of a tool that allows us to take a collection of images that may be around a topic or an industry or keyword or location. And by using image annotation, we can understand what are the most prevalent objects. By example, for the topic of luxury, we can explore what this means for Western consumers, where it's often very material based, and the objects that you see may be shoes or handbags, coats, or cars. Whereas in markets like Japan, we find that luxury is more experiential based, that the objects that show up in posts are more communal and curated. We can also look in image annotation not only for objects that are important to different communities and cultures, but we can also look at brands. And we can ask questions like, how prevalent is my client's brand within a set of images? And we often see in many markets that Western clothing brands are the brands that are most often seen. But it's interesting to note that the brand that has the highest coverage rate or highest prevalence, although it has a lot of kind of coverage from an annotation standpoint, it's actually the second and third brands that I would consider to have the greatest level of engagement. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the brand that is most prevalent, the content is often content that the brand has provided. Consumers are repurposing and reposting that. Where the second or third brands, what we see is more that the brand is shown more organically, where the consumers are interacting with the brand and posting it in that way. So it's interesting to be able to have this kind of comparison around cultures and communities, what objects are important to them, which experiences are important to them, and look at this from the lens of brands as well. This allows us to consider new KPIs that can inspire our creative, KPIs such as category coverage, brand coverage, organic brand creative, and looking at some of the emotive elements again that we don't want to miss. By example, does the coincidence of consumers in our brand show higher levels of emotion or maybe a smile index? These are wonderful things that we can explore by using Vision AI and social media together. So in summary, Vision AI it's an ever-growing, accessible, and it's essentially becoming a fast part of creative development and performance measurement. Vision AI connected to social provides powerful and authentic insights to consumers and allows us to rethink KPIs for performance measurement. So I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in today's session. And in closing, say, I hope that you found this session to be interesting and perhaps a little bit inspiring and giving you thoughts to how you might consider Vision AI to better measure creative, find deeper consumer insights, and explore how consumers are interacting with brands. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And that's very interesting insights on content and how to link to brands. And to pick up the discussion and take it further, I'm very pleased to introduce multi-award-winning a content lead at Group M Indonesia, Rina Simon, who is not only a seasoned content marketer, but she's led many engagements with blue chips like Pfizer, Chevron, Colgate-Palmolive, and many more. She's even got a foundation. She's even launched the Foundations of Data-Driven Creativity in Wavemaker, Philippines, and has transformed its Asia-Pacific hub of excellence within the Asia network. Prior to Group M, she was at the helm of Havas team, where she rewrote the brand's digital DNA and led the organization within the Havas creative business to sharpen its digital creative offering and its social analytics. As mentioned before, she's currently the head of content for Group M Indonesia. She leads a 40-man team of digital content experts, and today she'll be talking to us about a content platform and how that helps organizations with media, PR strategy, and insights into consumers. And she'll also share with us what that means for us from a privacy perspective and from a wider ecosystem perspective. So without any further ado, please let me hand over to Rina for her thoughts and comments. Thanks, Rina.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rina Simon, and I'm the content lead from Group M Indonesia. Today, we are going to talk about the intersection of content and data and how we can use content data platform and artificial intelligence to unlock brands' growth. So first things first, what we need to understand is we need to debunk the misconception when it comes to content data platform, and it's usually associated with just creatives. But what we don't realize is that building your own content data and content data platform cuts across the different lines of businesses when it comes to brand communication. It cuts across media because now we're talking about which type of media channel best resonates with a particular type of content. It informs your PR strategies because we are able to understand audience sentiment. And most importantly, we're able to understand a deeper insight when it comes to consumers. So we understand content trends, historical data, and predict content trends moving forward. So now that we've understood what content data platform can bring, what we should realize is what is really content data? How do we define content data? So essentially, a content data are millions and billions of public content out there. These are social posts, content from web pages, from publishers, celebrities, influencers, brands, and e-commerce pages. So these are all public data that when we unlock and when we try to analyze them will allow us to become more impactful and relevant when we craft our brand communication. But when we look at nowadays in the industry, particularly for us in WPP, what we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to content data. So content data is the biggest missing piece when it comes to understanding the entire marketing mix. We've invested so much when it comes to media tools, understanding programmatic and how a particular piece of content from the media perspective resonates with brands' data. But what we haven't really unlocked is the power of content data in making sure that we measure communication resonance, we monitor brands and competitions, online sales, we unlock contextual categories, and we identify creators as well as content trends in this very cluttered content environment. So how do we, now that we've said that, yes, we have to build our own content data platform, but how do we do it? Are we going to be another Google? Are we playing in the same space as Google? And the answer is no. When you look at all the pieces of content out there, it's a vast wasteland. It's very cluttered. But as marketers, the only pieces of content that truly matters to us is 1% out of the 100%. These are the content that we should focus on: impactful, relevant, and genuine pieces of content from publishers, from influencers, e-commerce, as well as social media pages. These types of content are the ones that will be able to allow us to unlock brands' growth and to move the needle when it comes to campaigns and marketing strategies. But the biggest challenge for us is really to convince brands that it's a worthy investment to invest in their own brand content data and content data platform. And in doing so, we need to understand the nature of the way we work in our industry. And it's very reliant on humans. Agency contracts last for 2-3 years. Media planners move from one agency to the other. Brand marketers move from one brand to the other. And the resulting effect is that the data that we have is heavily reliant on humans, and that's something that we want to avoid if we have, or if your brands invest in your own content data. One, it will allow you to understand deeply your own private data, your own performance, and it allows you to cull richer and deeper insights on campaign, consumer, competition, category, and largely predict what are the trends when it comes to the industry. So how do we establish your own content data platform? So the first step when it comes to establishing your content data platform is decoding the content DNA or content genome. So in Group M, what we've realized is every piece of content can be analyzed by why, how, what, when, to whom, and by whom each piece of content is directed at. And we call that content DNA. The content genome can be broken down into 4 pillars. So the first pillar is the identification pillar. So every piece of content we analyze based on the demographics, the targeting, the location, the interest that it covers, the type and the family status of the audience that it tries to cover. That is the identification pillar. The second pillar of the content genome is audience data. Essentially, it's analyzing the interaction of our audience versus the piece of content. Who are the people who are reading your content? From where they are from? What are their interests? What is the potential reach of your content versus the audience? The third pillar of the content genome is called composition pillar. Essentially, we're mapping out the performance of your content, the keywords that were used, the topic that it covers, the channels with which we released it, and the formats that it was released on. And last but not the least is purpose pillar. Essentially, every piece of content out there, no matter how short or how long, has a purpose to it. So we're trying to identify what type of product it promotes, the objective of that piece of content, the format, and the pricing of that piece of content. And once we've systematically analyzed the DNA across these 4 pillars, what it yields is that we're able to automate matching opportunities for brands. When we tackle brand briefs, the traditional approach is that we get the communication messaging and we tackle it in a very qualitative/quantitative way. But if you have your own content data platform, the platform will automatically match opportunities using artificial intelligence, using keywords and topics, and match it with whatever piece of content and whatever publisher or content creator is out there that is most resonating or most relevant for your brand. So it allows us to be more data driven when it comes to content planning, and we're automating as well content generation. So there are multiple types of technologies out there, and allow me to take you through 3 out of the many out there when it comes to content data platform. So the first one is called Content Trainer. So when you work with a content data platform, usually as a brand marketer, you will try to analyze what are the trends when it comes to content. What's the competition doing? So using a content trainer, when you input a certain keyword, for example, baby milk, we're able to use artificial intelligence technology to train the content data platform to yield the most relevant search engine results by removing negative content. So example, baby milk, what it will yield you are only the words that are particularly positive content related to baby milk, as opposed to the irrelevant content just basically using baby and milk as the keywords. So the next technology is called auto matching. So auto matching essentially simplifies the planning process. So we're using artificial intelligence to identify the profile of the audience of your own brand assets. And what it generates is lookalike creators based on your own profile. So for example, you're a hair care brand. We've analyzed your assets, your Instagram or your Facebook account. What we want to do is find look-alike creators with similar profiles, with similar interests, and with similar content spaces, so that we generate a more resonating communications plan or content plan for your brand. Also, using auto matching, we can also identify competitors with similar demographics. So usually as brand marketers, we identify competition based on category only. But using content data platform, you will see that outside of your own category, you will have other competition with similar profiles of audience, not necessarily of the same category. And last but not the least, and I think this is where we're all headed as brand marketers, agency planners, is a brand AI dashboard. So brand AI dashboard is essentially establishing your own smart dashboard that uses artificial intelligence and culls public data across all the relevant pieces of content for brands. And we have this tool already in BritCham called Incatech. So what it does is that we aggregate all the creators out there, whether it's publishers, influencers, celebrities, brands, and e-commerce pages. We analyze the DNA of all these public data content, and we layer it with artificial intelligence and program our algorithm so that we are able to automatically identify opportunities for brands. And what it yields is that it's an automated dashboard. So it yields an automated content plan, and it allows you to understand deeper the audience insights when it comes to how your audience interacts with content. It allows us to have a deeper understanding of competition, as well as do predictive modeling when it comes to content trends. So that brings me to the last section of my presentation. I hope that I was able to inspire everyone to start investing in their own content data platform, and to start making sure that we have the intersection of data and content, particularly to unlock brands growth. So I look forward to your comments later on during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And to take that conversation further around the content data platform, and to talk more about the challenges faced by CMOs today, that being better customer experience, managing data analytics, and maximizing efficiency, and to explain more around how a data platform interacts with your current initiatives, is Deepika Nikhilender, who's the Senior Vice President for Asia-Pac at Xaxis. Deepika is also an award-winning marketing professional. She's got over 25 years of experience in the industry, and she is known, probably even by some of you in the audience, as a mover and shaker in driving operational excellence and automation initiatives in digital media, particularly with data-driven solutions and technology-driven communications, as well as digital strategies and planning. She currently leads Xaxis regional markets in Asia Pacific, and she also works with many global brands. Prior to joining Xaxis, Deepika managed regional growth and with world-renowned companies such as Unilever, Nestle, Nike, American Express, HBO, BMW, and many others. So it is a great pleasure to hand over to Deepika now to take the conversation further. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I am Deepika Nikhilender from Xaxis APAC. Artificial intelligence is no more a cool and trendy concept. It is omnipresent and surrounds us as embedded in every facet of our life, creating significant benefits to many industries and sectors, and most definitely to the marketing and communication industry. In the next 10 minutes, I'd like to share with you how AI is powering business outcomes and enabling the CMO to make decisions towards efficiency and effectiveness of their investments. The CMO challenges are many, but these are three very dominant and significant ones that are definitely going to play a big role in the CMO's scope in 2021 and beyond. Firstly, customer expectations are at an all-time high, and customers are expecting a lot of their experiences to be matched. If not, their loyalties are short and they will take their business elsewhere. As a result, the CMO wants to design and deliver very seamless customer experience. More than 3/4 of the market leaders are also saying that the data and analytics is being used to drive a key decision more so than ever before. And most of them are struggling to evolve the data capabilities of their organization. Delivering more actionable insights of their data will be a top priority for the CMO in 2021 and beyond. With over 7,000 MarTech solutions currently available and offering various benefits, MarTech spending has also become 25% and above of the total marketing budget. However, on an average, only 60% of the functionality of these technologies are being utilized. The CMO will want to focus on trying and getting the 60% to as close as 100% as possible so that they are able to justify this investment and validate it. The marketing and ad technology systems that are being built as an infrastructure to connect, to bridge, and set up themselves for answering a wide range of needs, such as understanding their consumers, finding audiences, activating, measuring, and so on, is ultimately creating a data deluge that could be overwhelming. Many CMOs are feeling the need to deal with it personally, but instead they should be asking the right questions, and not let this overwhelm them. These questions allow the AI to take that big data on so that they can focus on insights and growing the brand and the business. But along with the deluge, what also comes is terabytes of data and at speed, making it a challenge for us to store, manage, as well as put it to relevant use for our decisions. In the digital world, with so many technologies at play, we have, along with structured data, a lot of unstructured data that is also coming at us. Now, without AI, it would be very hard for us to sift through this information and derive insights, trends, and make predictions that we can use. However much AI attempts to close in on human intelligence, it is important to note that AI by itself could create havoc or ineffective decisions. This is definitely true for our business because the humans understand certain business nuances, certain consumer nuances that are imperative for us to get an optimal outcome. Humans can focus on the strategy while the machine on the delivery. There are many challenges facing the industry, but at the end of the day, what matters most is, can we get towards the business outcomes that are unique to us? Can we measure and prove these investments work for us? And most importantly, we also need to understand that not everybody's desired outcome is the same. We will need to customize the outcome as well as the approach to getting to it. Let me introduce you to Copilot, our proprietary technology that allows you to deliver custom outcomes. It enables machine learning and AI decisioning in programmatic advertising. It is integrated with the DSP and allows brands to configure unique and composite KPIs. Ultimately, complex algorithms are being continuously put to use to deliver campaign delivery at speed and precision. This allows us an unparalleled advantage to leverage both human and AI knowledge, expertise, and experience. With our global footprint, scale, and teams of programmatic experts on the ground, you're getting the best of both human and machine intelligence and skills. Copilot also has the optimization engine that utilizes the machine learning algos analyzing billions of unstructured data points at any given point in time. It selects features that are relevant to a campaign. A feature could be a device type, a creative size, a time of day, or any such variable. Think of it similar to a line item. So what we can take as an example is Annie, who we want to target. She is from Singapore and is frequently online in weekends and more so between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. and is likely to order in pizza. However, it's not just this one Annie. We have access to thousands and thousands of users who potentially might order the pizza. Copilot scans and looks at all of them and groups them into clusters, ranks each cluster based on relevance and priority so that the algorithm can then value them appropriately. It is important to note that the human intervention is happening at the same time alongside Copilot. Humans are good at testing and learning. So it puts a fair amount of hypotheses to test and learn and picks the winner and applies them. While the DSP focuses on taking decisions at speed and optimizing towards a performance goal. However, the DSP does not have the ability to find unique trends and feature combinations. But Copilot, which you see at the bottom layer, is actually making granular probes and machine learning analysis of the feature combination and doesn't cut out the opportunities. A trader can analyze this data too. However, Copilot can do it at a much, much faster speed. It can take a trader 14 days to do what Copilot does. So therefore making Copilot so much more efficient in time, but also across the combinations that it can address, it has the ability to cover more than 7 times features than a trader can. Copilot's frequency of automation and optimization allows these algorithms to predict and react in real time. A trader can take manually quite a fair amount of time to adjust these strategies, but by which time Copilot would have unlocked thousands of bid opportunities that can win and allow us to get to that goal faster. This means that the algorithm is beginning to mold itself to the unique data sets of the client, as well as making each dollar of investment work harder for you. It recognizes all the combinations, and instead of killing some of the low performance combinations, it will deprioritize them and still take on the value that it can contribute to achieving the end outcome. Copilot is continually learning. With more and more data, it is analyzing throughout the campaign flight. Here, what we see is a 4-week campaign flight that has been visually expressing the decision tree of Copilot. So each of these are decision tree, and the branches are the feature combinations and clusters that it has created, on which it is placing value as well as using towards the end optimization. Imagine each of these features as a line item that is being created. And from week 1 to 2, you can see that these features are actually growing. By week 3 and 4, these features have grown further, and it is not only learning from the historical data, but also from the live campaign data of the campaign in flight. And all this is happening real time as Copilot never sleeps. Then you turn all of these actions into the outcomes that matter to you. These outcomes can vary from a lower funnel priority, a full funnel strategy, or a brand awareness objective that needs us to just achieve something like unique reach. Marketers of different brands will desire different responses. This on the screen is a spectrum of desired outcomes that marketers want. Copilot can be layered on technology across all of these spectrum of outcomes, some standard, but many custom, ultimately created for the unique data sets of the client as well as the business challenge. You may ask, how does this technology ultimately perform, and to what extent can it lift the current benchmarks? Here is a handful of results that we have achieved from Copilot over the many years. On the top, top row, what you see is how Copilot has succeeded in lowering the cost of achieving an outcome. And in the bottom row, how it has impacted in achieving effectiveness via metrics such as return on ad investment. Most of you will agree that at the end of the day, while the medium is important, the creative or the message is also an important factor for success of a campaign. While Copilot ingests signals from media and online and offline consumer interactions, we also know it is important that we need to complete this trinity by bringing in creative dimensions. We are currently in progress in building Creative Plus solution that can empower brands to achieve outcomes through creative strategies that they have deployed. Using signals from data-driven creatives, such as engagement with the ad, the size, the color, the images and the video elements and the copy and so on, we can take optimization to a whole new level. This integration will drive holistic and effective outcomes for the campaigns activated by the brand owners. With that, let me summarize my session with these 5 highlights that I'd like to leave behind. AI can harness data and provide insights at speed that we cannot match with the human applications. Marketers will definitely benefit significantly if they leverage AI to achieve their business outcomes and more so the custom ones to their challenges. Data and technology invested in must ultimately help us to achieve our decisions and measure what matters, and we must chase results that are meaningful. AI cannot replace a human, and the two must go hand in hand. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it on the chat, and we will answer it during the live Q&A.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction to the Copilot platform and to talk us through some of the challenges and the answers to that from Deepika. But moving on now to none other than Sudipta Roy, who's the Chief Transformation Officer at Mindshare. And Sudipta will share with us how we can survive in a cookieless world. And you can see behind him how passionate he is about the topic. And I'm sure that all of you, like me, will find this to be a fascinating 10, 11 minutes or so. Sudipta is a highly accomplished marketing and communication leader with 2 decades of work in senior leadership roles, particularly in WPP, Mindshare, and other agencies. He's built up his reputation around driving transformation of business and leading some of the largest and most complex client account teams. Inside Mindshare, he currently wears 2 hats. He's the Chief Transformation Officer for Mindshare APAC, as well as the Chairman of WPP Team Unilever for Asia, Africa, and Russia. He's considered by many as one of the new breed of technology-savvy leaders in marketing. And Sudipta has been the driving force behind the adoption and evolution of data-driven marketing in Asia. He works extensively with new companies to support business and product innovation in marketing, ranging from the new uses of AI to the evolving approaches to consumer privacy in ad tech and martech. And without any further ado, I'll hand over to Sudipta to talk to us about how we may survive in a cookieless world, and that will take us into our Q&A. Over to you, Sudipta.
Thank you so much, Stuart, and hello, everyone. I'll just take a moment to load my screen. Okay. I hope everyone can see this. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a topic which is of extreme interest and which has captured the imagination of the marketing industry and our clients and agencies alike. Many of you will know this, that advertising technology is being radically altered today. It started with the big news from Apple when they said that they're going to cut off all intelligent tracking in their apps and their browsers. And finally, Google came out with an announcement that they will phase out third-party cookies by 2022. The others followed suit. So Firefox said the same thing, and we expect everybody to sort of go in this direction. So I mean, just to quickly remind you, why is all this conversation happening? Okay, why do websites need ads, and what do cookies have anything to do with it? Why can't we just get rid of it already? And the reason for that is that cookies drive the internet's implicit value exchange. Consumers get free content in exchange for money that publishers make from ad sales. The underlying value exchange is a consumer's information in the cookie in return for free content on the website. And that in turn happens because ad monetization is aided by cookies, which helps connect the right person to the right message at the right time, which essentially means that it makes advertising on that website useful. And the more useful it is, the more the website owner can charge for those ads, and the more the website owner can fund their own activities of running all that infrastructure, of paying all the editors and writers who create the content on that website. The problem happened when parts of the industry misused the cookies to further their commercial goals at the expense of consumer privacy, because the way the industry is constructed right now, the information available in the cookies is fairly freely available to everyone to use and reuse. So that created issues, and therefore the state, several governments, people, and the ad industry is looking for alternate answers. So why can't it be done any other way? Or why could it not have been done any other way? Why did cookies last for such a long time? Wasn't there an alternate architecture possible? It's actually down to the sales architecture of the digital publishing world. If you thought about the old school traditional media sales architecture, it was predominantly driven by what we call as reserved booking systems, similar to reserving a seat on an airplane or a train. You have finite sellers selling to finite buyers, negotiating each case on its own merit. I'm sure many of you remember, a sales executive from a leading television channel or a print publication coming to you and discussing the front page, the back page, or prime time slot, and how much it will cost. So you can imagine the construct: there's finite buyers, finite sellers, and direct negotiation between the two parties. That's possible when it is finite, but the size of the open internet as of 2019 was 1.72 billion websites. So this kind of a setup just doesn't work for a nearly infinite system, which the internet is, right? So therefore, the industry needed to come up with an alternate model to drive this, and therefore everyone realized that you need an automated seller meet buyer architecture where there aren't human beings going from the seller to the buyer trying to sell space. It had to be automated in some way, and it needed to be driven by a non-human price determination layer, because infinite people connecting with infinite buyers can't do one-to-one negotiation. So there needed to be some other architecture, and therefore the concept of auctions. So typically, I mean, the way it works is when a user visits a website, the website communicates with the ad exchanges, with the supply side platforms to which the publishers are registered to. The supply side offers information to the demand side platforms, which are advertisers and agencies. And there is an automated negotiation which takes place, which says, hey, I have a certain consumer available. Do you want this guy? And the demand side platform says, yeah, I need 100,000 of these kind of people. What price are you looking for? And the supply side platform says this costs between 0.5 to 0.7 dollars or $1 to $2 per 1,000 impressions. Are you okay with that? They say, yeah, I'm okay. And at that point, the advertising banner, which the client has agreed upon, is fired from the demand side platform to the supply side, and it lands up inside the website. This whole thing takes 3 milliseconds. So you can imagine that this was a very, very clever way to solve a very hard problem, which is an infinite buyer meets seller problem. And cookies play a great role inside that, because they play a role in the matchmaking process between the publisher and the advertiser. They carry the information which is required to tell the systems, hey, I have a useful part of the audience available. Does anyone want it, right? And it's almost like the oil flowing inside the pipe, or the blood flowing inside the veins. I mean, it carries all the oxygen which is required for advertising. The problem, however, comes from the permissions linked to sharing the consumers. The way the real-time bidding architecture is built right now allows several participants to harness that data. And the problems actually came from that. So what the world is trying to do is they're trying to mitigate the negative parts of that architecture and replace it with something which becomes very secure. So a quick look at what gets impacted. What really gets impacted is everything which is associated with browsers or the open internet, and also part of what's associated with apps. So iOS has already, put several measures in place. So you can assume that around 1/3 of the smartphone app ecosystem will get affected. So take 20% from there. You have desktop and laptop browsers, another 20%. You have smartphone web, another 10%. Okay, and you have tablet web around 3%. So 30% of the digital investments will get impacted directly because of Google's announcements. And we would say another 20% gets impacted immediately due to Apple's announcement. So you can easily expect 50% of the investment today as it pertains to push media, okay, where you're buying from the open exchange world and the app world getting affected. So a quick look at what really is getting affected in terms of data. So there are two kinds of audience data. One is what's carried by cookies and device IDs. These are what we call inferred or probabilistic data. These are passive signals which are generated by the connections. As you browse, it says, hey, this person was on a parenting website, therefore this person is possibly a parent. Somebody who's visiting golf websites, this person is possibly a fan of golf or plays a lot of golf. And these kind of inferred labels get put inside the cookie containers and device ID containers and paint a portrait of you. Therefore, they are called inferred or probabilistic. This gets affected. Then there is another part of the world, especially the world owned by the walled gardens like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, Instagram, and increasingly the connected TVs and the OTT platforms. These are deterministic because they're declared authenticated data from consumers. They are built around email addresses, phone numbers, account IDs, single sign-on IDs, and these are very accurate, and they allow you to connect to them one-to-one and know them one-to-one. These are not affected, right? So the underlying debate which is on in the industry is really, do I need to track so much in order to deliver effectively? Should we allow consumers to be tracked? Do advertisers really need so much intelligence? Do you need information on every person at an individual level? Or can you live with cohorts? Will it affect addressability? Will it affect the ability to show a consumer an ad? So the debate is between this balance. How much information do you really need to advertise effectively? So what do you, as an advertiser, stand to lose, or what part of your world gets affected? One thing is for sure. I mean, you do need to prepare, okay? And we've ranked the effect from high to low in the order that you see on the slide. So you have media which gets affected the most. Cookies and device IDs play a very important role in as a single sort of carrier of information, which allows you to calculate reach across multiple websites and apps. So that gets affected. all the third-party audience marketplaces from where you buy audiences off the shop shelf and advertise for push messaging, that gets affected. All the real-time bidding technologies which go into what we call ad tech, that gets affected. Your investments in DMPs, a part of it, okay, which is used for collecting information, collect cookie data information, that gets affected. Analytics, which is things like conversions across websites, not your own website, conversions on third-party websites, app analytics, attribution or multi-touch attribution, as we call it, that gets affected. And as you start going towards the right, it gets a little less affected. So if all your insights are coming from, publisher data, that is as you advertise on third-party systems, then it gets affected. But if you're investing a lot on panel-based insights, it doesn't get affected. Experience creation, which is on-site personalization, call center personalization, CRM, this doesn't get affected because it is not reliant upon cookies. It relies upon tracking, but it is not reliant upon cookies. And it is your own websites for the most part. So that is safe. What happens to targeting? So there are a couple of things you need to remember about targeting. I mean, there are some mechanisms of targeting, okay, which on the part of targeting which gets affected the most is this notion of a cohort of one, where we've been trained to think that data-driven marketing and precision marketing is a beautiful thing, which allows you to address each person on their own merit with almost limitless personalization. Okay, that notion is going to die. And the industry is by and large has by and large agreed on that. What will come up is the ability to come up with really intelligent cohorts and advertise to them. The second big thing which is coming up is contextual advertising, and then the way this will evolve is that even if you had no information about the cohort of a consumer, you could infer a lot at the moment when a consumer is reading a certain kind of article or consuming a certain kind of content, because the nature of content a consumer is consuming tells a lot about that person's current state or that person's interest. As for example, in this slide, there's an example on The Guardian where there's an article on 10 of the best money tips for teenagers. So if you take the two keywords here, money, tips, and teenagers, okay, there are certain kinds of advertisers who will be interested in that. And therefore, let's say a bank which is trying to get lower-aged consumers to open more accounts, okay, that becomes immediately useful for them, or certain kind of investment mechanisms, or even other educational institutions. So determining, what kind of brand will be interested in what kind of content territories comes alive in this form, and that will evolve very fast. Okay, so quick look at what the market is doing. So the market is doing four big things. There are a bunch of people who hold a lot of information. They are creating central identity graphs, and this is known as the unified ID. The leading company on this, and there are several of them, there are 15 companies who have proposed their solutions. Trade Desk is a popular and a big one. They've come out with something called Unified ID 2.0, handed it over to the open industry to run and maintain. This is dependent upon email IDs and single sign-ons, and will provide an alternative to cookies. There's a debate on whether this really solves all the problems, because it's still carrying individual level user information. So Google has come out last week saying that we won't allow third-party cookie alternatives to be deployed. We will only give you our solutions, and therefore all the solutions which the 15 other companies are proposing may not work for Chrome. So the industry is still in a bit of a logjam on where they go, and this is going to resolve over the next couple of months. The second big thing that the industry is doing is the creation of distributed identity models, which essentially means that different companies own different kinds of data about the same consumer. So the construct of these new models are like this. There is a neutral data clean room, a neutral data mixing venue, okay, where different parties, let's say a marketer's data and a media company's data, come together. They match the different characteristics of the same consumer, okay, and agree on what the information enrichment protocol is going to be. However, neither party is allowed to carry this data back to their organizations. You create an enriched profile and you determine what cohorts will be created and how will you advertise to them from this neutral venue. And every large company is coming out with solutions for this. The most popular one is Google Marketing Platform's Ads Data Hub. They've already automated and created a ready-to-use platform where you can mix and match data, and you can pump it out to the different Google properties to advertise. Facebook was the first one to do it, and they have a really useful and evolved platform. It's known as the Facebook Conversions API. Amazon is coming out with a clean room. So we should expect to see this become a commonplace occurrence. Equally, there are third-party companies and ecosystems that we as WBP are investing on and experimenting with as well, which will be available. The third model is the walled garden identity model. Okay, so if you look at your graph on the left-hand side, that tells you the story of how big the walled gardens are. Very few people actually know this, but Facebook's 2020 ad sales revenue was $85 billion, which is significantly larger than the total money which the open internet makes. So the open internet makes $70.5 billion, which in turn is slightly larger than what Google makes, which is $49 billion. But you can see the amount which is sitting just between Facebook and Google. So what these guys are saying is that you can use our identity system and advertise to the rest of the ecosystem, which is the open internet and the other apps. You don't necessarily need to go to an open system. Okay, why take all the hassle? Just be with us and we will help you, which is why we call them the walled garden. It's beautiful inside, but it's within those walls, right? And you can obviously understand the concerns with that because it creates a less competitive and less open marketplace. We need competition. We need the capitalist free market system to continue, and you don't want duopolies or oligopolies. So the world is concerned about putting too much inside route number 3. Route number 4, and perhaps the most interesting, or rather the most radical one, is what Google has created as a project called the Privacy Sandbox Project. What they're saying is that we think that any mechanism which allows the consumer's information to leave either the browser or the app is fundamentally dangerous for the ecosystem. So they've come out with a system called Flock, or federated learning of cohorts, where your browser inside your machine is going to estimate which cohort you belong to and only going to send a signal to other parties about your cohort. It will not release any other information about you. You can see the merit of that system. But you can also see the concern about that system, which is not only do you own Android and Chrome, which are the predominant sort of consumer operating systems, if you will, but you're also now controlling the ad delivery mechanism. So it concentrates a lot of power in your hands. But do we all agree that this is a useful and new technology to solve the problem? The answer is yes. So knowing how complex and how dynamic this whole game is, what should you as a marketer and a corporate start thinking and doing? IAB has done a useful survey with all of you, and the outcomes are interesting. So 60% are thinking of increasing the spending and emphasis on the use of first-party data, because the stronger first-party data you build, the better it gets for you, the lesser you're reliant upon external systems. Increase your focus and experimentation on third-party resolution systems. Build more second-party data relationships, the clean room kind of efforts that I spoke to you about. If you have a lot of first-party data, figure out in-house identity resolution systems, engage with third-party industry groups to participate in the decision around what kind of identity resolution systems the market should go for, increase spending on contextual advertising because that does not depend upon an identity system, and increase testing and investment on new solutions. Don't stay static, keep working on it. So we've come out with a simple way to streamline and accelerate your steps. Okay, the 5 quick things that we think you should do, irrespective of who you do with. Establish an identity partner and an identity roadmap, which means you have to attend to it now. You need to think about it now. The second thing is think about how you're creating experiences for your consumers, because if you get the value exchange with them right, you will be able to create data by design. So a lot of clients are getting data by default. They haven't really thought through it. We think the time is right for you to accelerate that. The third thing is test the impact of no third-party data usage. Think about what happens to your DMP, identify direct publisher partner relationships and direct ID integrations. If you're dependent upon a lot of push advertising, which as for example, FMCG consumers are, okay, this becomes a really critical step. The fourth thing is reset your KPIs and think about what kind of analytics will you have in the near future, and therefore what will you retire, what will you bring in instead, and finally think about what your insights mechanism will be and what your infrastructure for insights and partnerships for insight will be. That brings me to the end of my session. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Sudipta. And while we just prepare for some of the questions for the Q&A, if I could ask the panelists to unmute themselves and to put their videos back on, then we'll get started. And Sudipta, it was a fascinating discussion and series of events that you've just taken us through. And I guess a lot of the questions that are coming through from the audience and on the wire is, you know, after all you've said, are all our data investments now in some respects wasted? And is there a whole new investment cycle we need to go through? And maybe you can give us a sense for how we assess that.
Yeah, I mean, this is what keeps me awake at night, and this is what gets me out of bed in the mornings, which is the collective decision-making about what's going to happen to our investments. And it's not just yours. I mean, we as agencies have made huge investments as well. I would say they're not wasted. I think the way we should think about it is they are at risk. In the short term, the one thing that we should do is we shouldn't stay inactive. We should continue to experiment. We should continue to milk the benefits to whatever we can from the existing systems. Equally, we should all be discussing with our partners on how to de-risk our investments and your investments. So if you've invested in a DMP, you need to go back to your DMP partner and say, hey, we invested this and this was a partnership, but we are going to be at risk. So how are you thinking about de-risking us? How are you thinking about the solutions? I think you need to smartly distribute your risks a little bit. And that can only come if you actively lean in and understand what part of your business is at risk. So audit your chain and see what part. Not every client is at the same risk, right? FMCG is at far higher risk. A banking institution, which goes directly to consumers, uses a lot of their own assets to connect with consumers, is at lesser risk. Not at zero risk, but less risk. So yeah.
And Sudipta, just to cut in there, is the impact of the cookieless world the same for all businesses, or are some organizations prone to more impact? Are some categories more impacted than others? And again, is there a simple way of assessment?
Yes, a simple handle to assess this is that if you are a business which necessarily depends upon very wide consumer outreach, as for example, fast-moving consumer goods are, then your reliance upon third-party systems is much greater. Your reliance upon push advertising is much greater. So that is the one which is at highest risk.
Right.
Then if you are a B2B marketer, for example, which is reliant upon pull advertising. So as for example, let's say you mostly rely on getting your prospects through, rolling out white papers, getting interest, and then collecting their connections data, then you are at much lesser risk. Okay, so it depends upon the advertising model.
Right, thanks, Sudipta. And just moving the conversation along, Thomas, besides using Vision AI for testing creative and advertising, what are the other options? What are the other applications that brands can look at?
Sure. Thanks, Drew. That's an interesting question. And I want to personalize that response by just talking about how we've seen a kind of radical change in how we engage with brands. And certainly that's been driven dramatically in the last 9 months or so by COVID, where COVID's forced us to do a lot of things online that we had not done before. And it's forced brands to equally react to stand-up digital experiences. So, as banks began to close, or as we kind of had to move from face-to-face interactions to doing things online or doing them over the phone or working with chatbots, AI really had to step in. And I'll give just a couple of examples. So if you look at the number of sites that have been built up or functionality that have built into sites, especially in areas like financial services and other areas, there's been a lot of investment. But they couldn't take the same approach from a design standpoint, which is put in for the consumers, test and learn and do all this UA testing. They had to be much more rapid in the design cycle. So here AI stepped in and allowed us to surface where consumers were struggling, dropping off, and surface these insights for more optimal and quicker design. In the case of call centers, we've always leaned on voice activated response and being able to learn from what people were saying and where people were dropping off. But AI started to come in and not only look at doing NLP analysis and listening to what words were people are saying, but how they were saying it. Was their voice elevated? Was there more crosstalk? Was there anger? And then try to shift the way that telephony experience is happening to resolve issues much more quickly. Let me give you a last example, which isn't really necessarily from a commercial world, but from education. A lot of us parents with young kids were all of a sudden forced into online education as a shared experience with our kids, right? You probably remember us attending some of those first Zoom, calls or Teams calls. And educators were equally struggling as well. They had to all of a sudden, everything shifted around and they had to put all this content material that was often, went to be in person or experiential from a classroom standpoint. Here, Vision AI also helped, and kind of harking back to some of the ways that I was talking about Vision AI, looking at the expressive and emotive reactions and being able to help educators find out where kids were struggling or help them kind of recraft the way that they were translating in-class experiences to online experiences. And I think that's a wonderful example where AI agents help better read and understand consumers and people, hopefully help us be more empathetic in the way that we use machines, online experiences, and AI generally.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And that is a wonderful example. And Deepika, just switching to you, you spoke about business outcomes. I guess what we still see in the marketplace is that digital marketers are still briefing in terms of short-term KPIs like acquisitions, clicks, lands, etc. Maybe you could just tell us, what are your thoughts on where they're missing in their perspective, what they're missing in their perspective?
Sure. That's a very big reality, Stuart. What we're seeing is many marketers tend to focus inordinate levels of budget on the lower funnel, as what we call it in the consumer funnel, and also focusing on short-term KPIs like lands and sales and basket value, basket size. But how much can you milk that part of the funnel without really investing in the other parts of the funnel? I think what they're really missing is the big picture. And when I say big picture, I mean the entire consumer journey, the other stages in the consumer journey, the interplay between the other stages in the consumer journey to what actions they want from the consumer. It is really important that they understand and map that consumer journey for that particular category, for their brand, and for the stage of the brand. And therefore, it's at the end of the day, a very big balance between long-term and short-term strategies. Just focusing on short-term strategies like sales all the time will not achieve that end business outcome, because building the brand, the equity of the brand, addressing the brand's image and perception, all of that would also ultimately derive that end consumer action that they are so desiring. So ultimately, if we want the business outcomes to be achieved, it's really important to articulate it clearly. And if you just put short-term KPIs, there's a strong chance we're not going to ultimately achieve the ambition of the company.
Right, understood. And Rina, this would be a good point to bring you in, and just following on from Deepika's comments, maybe you can give us your perspective on the importance of the content data platform, particularly in the context of future-proofing your business. And you touched on some of this, I think, in your comments. But maybe you could just take that discussion a little bit further for us.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I think it's something very related to what Deepika was saying earlier, that we should be shifting the way we view KPIs, not just from a short-term, but on a long-term perspective. And when you start taking a step back, and when you look at how fragmented the industry is and how difficult it is to navigate right now, especially with the pandemic, you will have to realize that there is one single binding connection across all the consumer touch points. And it's not just data, but in reality, it's content. When we consume content across mobile, when we're out browsing on social media, when we're shopping on e-commerce, we don't treat data in a vacuum. We look at consumers vis-a-vis content, and we look at consumers not just as a pixel of data. How do consumers interact with a piece of content, and how can we make it more meaningful and more effective for our businesses? The marketers and the business leaders here in this call has spent so much time emphasizing that big data and investing in your first-party data is the way to go. It's the way to future-proof your business. But that is just half of the battle. When you invest in content data, you learn to unlock deeper insights when it comes to consumer journey, and you learn to understand it's not just a matter of answering the question, what platforms are the consumers in? Are they interacting with my business? Are they finding more meaningful solutions with my business? It's also understanding actionable insights about your consumers. If we're all in the business of outcomes, we're also in the business of making sure that we understand consumer behavior, and content is at the center of that understanding of the consumer behavior.
Yeah, quite right. And just switching back to Deepika, of course, in my business, we've heard of customers saying that data itself can be a promise and it can be a peril. We've seen and heard a lot today about the promise that lies in data and its uses, and Rina just touched on that. What are some of the perils to watch out for?
We could have a whole session on perils, but I'll try and keep that really short. A few that come top of my mind. Firstly, I think the peril more for the organization and the decisions that we will take with the data is the bad data, or data with inaccuracies, misinformation, wrong information that would lead us down a whole different path of not only bad decisions, but a lot of failures. The second that is becoming really very pronounced, and all the areas that have kind of been touched by Roy and Sudipta, as well as Rina and Thomas, is just there's so much availability of data that we are starting to harness, is how ethical is going to be the use of this data, and how do we ensure that we are using this data not to inflict any bias or abusing it in any certain way that might have any social impact on that. And that at an organizational level is becoming a very, very important responsibility. as well as one that nations are beginning to address and put in place for policies, is breach, the whole governance area. The PDPA, the GDPR, and all these areas that governments are instating. How do you adhere to those policies, and how do you not breach them is going to be very, very important. See, these are some very early, quick answers I can think of in terms of perils.
Thanks, Deepika. And Sudipta, I'm just going to come back to you on this. We've got quite a lot of interest on the wires about what you talked about in terms of cookie withdrawal. Maybe you could give us a very brief view on whether or not this will concentrate power inside the walled garden. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And should we really be neutral about it, in terms of our response? And then finally, you maybe give us a thoughts on whether this is setting the industry backwards or whether it's a positive thing for us and moving things forward.
This is a challenging question. So I think the industry is so dynamic right now that it's hard to give a clear answer on whether it's going to concentrate power. And I'll tell you why I say this. Our first reaction, our visceral reaction, typically tends to be this. But if you see where we are headed, the rise of connected TV and the rise of OTT platforms itself is changing the game. And they are not reliant upon cookies. So even as we speak, there's a very large part of the consumer connections landscape which will go in a very different direction. So maybe in the short term, it could look like that is concentrating power, but actually it won't, according to me. The industry will take care of it.
Yep.
Sorry, what was your second question?
Second question is this moving us backwards or forward?
No, this is definitely moving us forwards. There was a malaise that we needed to solve, and that was the sort of pernicious use of private consumer data, and the lack of an ethical stand on what is right. And this hard period that we are going through is going to be collectively good for the industry. This needed to change. And whichever side we are going to all come out on, we need to stay on this journey together and see it through. Of course, we should protect ourselves, but this is a step in the right direction.
Very good, thanks. And Rina, coming back to you, of course, we're still dealing with the challenges of COVID-19, and in many respects, that's meant that a lot of us and our business and our customers are challenged for budgets. How does content data impact on businesses in the current climate, and how do you see? And I know you've already touched on this, but maybe you could give us just some more thoughts on the benefits for investing in content data specifically at this time.
Yeah, the common misconception of marketers at this time is that I'm B2B, or I'm a mid-sized business, or I'm not an FMCG. I don't even need to invest in that because I have very limited budget. Two words, something that Thomas has briefly touched on also earlier: artificial intelligence. It makes our lives easier. It allows businesses to navigate smarter because you're not manually creating content. You're actually making sure that every piece of content that you invest in out there is something that works for your business and drives performance or conversion. Because ultimately, in this time and in this age where we're battling COVID-19, what we're trying to do is make sure that every piece of investment works for us and drives a conversion. So that's the only way that we can ultimately make sure that we leverage on a content data or content data platform moving forward for our businesses.
Deepika, just taking that forward, you spoke of a creative dimension, and there's no doubt that it's an important driver of effectiveness, particularly in communications. But how is technology powering brands to replace subjectivity with data-driven creativity?
So I think at a fundamental level, the data will help us better understand audience behaviors, preferences, which will obviously give us a tremendous amount of insights that can inform the relevance of our messages, right? And the message, the content of the message, the format, the personalization of it. And all of that can improve how effective our communication will be and get us that desired response that we want from our audience. And then we saw Thomas share fairly, how Vision AI was powering some of that. So there's so many other technologies available, but at a more sophisticated level, I would like to highlight that some personalization and dynamism is possible. Customizing messages for audience segments, moods, interests, and behaviors, etc., will really help power the end objective, as well as reduce that subjectivity and get us to data-inspired creativity and data-driven creativity.
Perfect. And Thomas, just to draw us into the close of this discussion, and thank you very much to all our audience members who've assisted with some of the questions coming in. But we've heard a lot about approaches to using data and technology to address the death of the third-party cookie, particularly what Sudipta was talking about. What are some of the ways that AI may allow reframing of how we understand consumers?
Sure. So I'll kind of highlight again a statistic that Sudipta surfaced earlier from the IAB in terms of where brands are putting their investment. And the biggest investment is around first-party data. But first-party data is just really a proxy, or the quality of that data is around first-party experiences. That is experiences that brands curate and manage often on their own site. And what we're seeing is a continual evolution in terms of our ability to personalize. So whether it be AI helping make better recommendations in terms of what you see, like in the Amazon or Netflix-based model, whether AI is helping craft different creative by modular creative design, or an area that we're focusing on a bit more because we have a lot of clients that are like auto manufacturers where we're building out virtual spaces like virtual showrooms. Imagine in the future where AI will look at things like eye tracking, sentiment analysis, emotional feedback to help kind of guide us better through those what will become virtual experiences, whether that be a virtual auto showroom like we're building now or improving on through eye tracking and this sentiment or emotive responses, or virtual showrooms, virtual department stores, virtual grocery stores.
Thanks, Thomas. And with that, we're out of time, and I know there's a lot of questions that are still to be answered and raised. Please feel free, those of you in the audience, to raise those post the event. But right now, I want to thank all of our panelists, Deepika, Thomas, Rina, and Sudipta. It's been a fantastic discussion. I've personally enjoyed it very much. I want to thank all our audience members for joining this morning. Please remember that all of our panelists and myself are available for a discussion post this event. So please reach out if you need to. And Sabina's email address is on the screen now. So if you'd like to make contact, please do so there. I know that there's a number of further events taking place, and please don't forget that on the 25th of March, we've got Grant Axe Rawlinson, who's been a speaker here before, a fascinating speaker, entitled From Peak to Peak with Grant Rawlinson. A little bit later in March, right at the end of March, we've got the Interactive Crisis Communications War Game, and there'll be another webinar. We have the Back to the Future webinar taking us into April, and then in the middle of April, we'll have a fascinating webinar talking about future cities, and particularly focused on ensuring the inclusion of invisible disabilities. So please make sure to diarize those and join us. There'll be a survey after this event as well, which will land in your inboxes. Please take the time and effort to fill it in. It really does help the Chamber to build on your comments and your thoughts, so that each of these events can be better and bigger. So thank you once again very much to Sudipta, Rina, Deepika, and Thomas for their insights today. It's been fascinating, and thank you to the audience for joining. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you very much.